Joe Biden or ZZ Top?
ZZ Top.
Whatever. Okay, so I like Kenny's thoughts that we can worry about whether we got it right later. So give me a chance to branch off into a lot of different directions. Hopefully I can keep it succinct, but we'll worry about what's right and wrong later. I have a degree in psychology from a Catholic seminary called St. Michael School of Theology. That's a BA. So I know a lot of, at least I grew up with a lot of psychology, and I learned a lot in being a landlord and a social activist in the neighborhood about how people think and work, and don't work things out. But since YouTube's come along, I think I've learned more about psychology than I did 4 years of school. So, one of the priests that I follow regularly recently is called Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan. He has several very good books. He's got some stuff on YouTube that I really like. But he's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he's been engaged in work with men for a long time. Coincidentally, when I was in college, took a junior year at Xavier University in Cincinnati, and he and several other Franciscans were given a parish by that diocese, and they had an outreach to high school kids. And so I would go as a college student, young adults, and so I would go as a college student to a high school gym on Friday night, filled with 500 to 600 young people to listen to him talk. And so I was probably just too immature to understand it, but you come out of it and they say, wow, that was really good. What did he say? I'm like, well, it was really good, but I don't know what he said. It was so broad and whatever. It was just inspiring, but I couldn't name it. But anyway, his mentor is St. Francis of Assisi, being a Franciscan priest, and he called St. Francis his father. And he said, and I learned this week, at the end of St. Francis's life, he was in a cave, and he's saying, God, who are you, and who am I? And so when I think about what is our role as a Christian man, those are the questions I want to work on this evening. Now, I also thought about a couple other questions that I thought that would follow up those two. Where are you going? How do you get there? And who do you take with you? Now, I just want to say that's the whole topic, but we're not going to get to that. We're just going to talk about who is God and who am I. And the other three topics we'll get back together again later. But you can't forget those things when you're talking about who you are as a man. And Richard Rohr says in a book called Falling Upward that there are two stages in a man's life. The first stage is when you're building your life and creating what he calls a container for what your life is about. And I think as I look at the young men in Soma, that's the character, that's the kind of life that you're building. You're building your life. You're making this container that's going to hold your life. And the second half of life, you're trying to understand what it means and what it's about, and why did you do what you did, and what happened during that first half. And so what I want to say tonight to the young men that are here is that if you're building that container, if you're creating a job, if you're doing your education, if you're building a marriage and a family, that's what you should be doing at this stage in your life. And feel good about that and feel like God's given that to you to do. Now, when you look at some of the other things that I see on YouTube, there's a section on 11 traits of a high-value man. And you can go into these things pretty quickly. I'll go through them real quickly, but that's, in a sense, this is, they're good, but they're not they're not the whole picture. A high value man is self-confident. He has leadership. He takes care of himself personally and physically. He has order and class. He's well-mannered. He's a lifelong learner. He makes plans and follow through. He's able to commit. He's passionate about his relationships, beyond just his relationship with a person. And these are all things, just look up 11 traits you'll find on YouTube. And it goes into a lot more detail, but then he takes responsibility for his faults. He understands that a woman of value can choose, and he respects her decision if she chooses no. So some of those things, I think, are what we're trying to be as men in the world. And maybe as Christian men and men who have a little deeper understanding, we realize that's not the whole picture. You know, just being confident and showing swagger, you know, gets you through your 20s and 30s and 40s. You know, and it might help you build your sales career. You know, but when you get done, you may have this sense of, oh, am I really good enough? You know, what's all that about? So that's the second half of life. What is it about when I'm trying to create this thing that's called my life? So there's a transition point, what Richard Rohr says, in between the first half and the second half of life, and he says it always comes through failure. And so that container breaks, it falls apart. Things don't happen the way you look at them. And then you go back to, wow, what was that? What am I doing and why? So you start asking in the second half of life, what is it for? You know, not just how did I do it, but why was it there? And you're calling on God at that point, and that's kind of where I'm at now. To say, you know, bless it, give it some meaning, give it some purpose. I want you to be happy if that's what you're doing is building your career. So when I look at myself from a philosophical point of view, I go back to that. You know, I am, I think, therefore I am. You know, because if I think, I've got a mind and a creativity and a way to move forward. And that becomes who I am. Where did I come from? It's God. Now, I believe that we become who God calls us to be when we ask Him, who do you want me to be? And so the key answer to any of these questions of who are you, who am I, where am I going, the method is to ask. It's so simple, but it's so profound that God answers your questions. You know, he says, oh, okay, here you go. Throws this person in your life. Or this thought comes to mind that, okay, I hadn't thought of that, you know. And I wish I'd written down a few more examples of that, because things happen in my life where I never thought of that, you know. But it's just asking. Means such power. So I'm going back to Isaiah 41. When you say, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So the fear not is so important. Starting out and realizing that God's got you. So when I think about who I am as this free, autonomous individual, when I go to my prayer time, my mind is so what do you do? Richard Rohr, he was a mystic, and he studies some of the Catholic saints and stuff. And so he says, how do you quiet that buzzing in your mind? You realize, and you start breathing. You know, your prayer becomes a concentration in your breathing. And if you just focus on your breathing, take away all the busyness in your brain. And you learn to do that over time so that your mind is receptive to what God has to say to you. So that's an important lesson. Whole courses on that. So that breath, though, is, you're tied in with God's Spirit, when you're focusing on your breathing. And when you ask who is God, He's the Father, He's the Creator. Okay? Who's Jesus? He's my brother, He's my strength. But a lot of times we don't understand, we don't really lean on who the Spirit is. If we can find God's Spirit in our spirit, then our life becomes more integral. It becomes more in touch with who God is and who He wants me to be. I kind of have to go from a different place than what Aaron started with. When my dad passed away last year, about a year ago in February. And I spent a day with him for like 2 years during COVID. I go visit him in Michigan. And my brother is 5 years younger than me. And that's just kind of the way it is. And my sister's, 2 years after him. But for some reason, it never occurred to me until this last year that I had my mother and my father's attention for 5 years. And so I realized, wow, okay, that's why I'm so egotistical. I'm the center of attention, and my wife and my brother can sometimes say, you just think you're all everything, all of it. And I'm going, no, I'm sorry. I started out that way, But, so I have a good self-image, bless God, and so I have a hard time not being who I am, because that's kind of where I started with. And so, but the point of that in my mind is for anybody else is to look at your relationships in your early life, and think about how does that impact who I am? And then bring those to God. Say, okay, I was a twin. This is what happened. Or my big brother was always beating up on me. Or I was the last of my wife was 10 out of 13. Okay? And she says, I'm the top of the bottom. And I'm the first of 3. And so whenever she feels or seems like she's not as important or not as valued, that kind of goes back to being the top of the bottom, and where I find God making us, moving us forward, is to give Him those things, give Him that place in your life, give Him that parent, give Him that traumatic experience when you were younger, and allow Him to heal that, and professionally too. But go to some professional help and get some counseling and work through those deep underlying tensions that are not allowing you to be who God wants you to be. Richard Rohr says a lot of times people in the first half of life, they're trying to achieve and glory and this and that. And he said, a lot of men just don't ever get past that. That's just who they are forever and ever. They don't ever get to the point of finding peace. There was a great line in the second or third song about I don't have to be so special anymore. I can just be who God wants me to be. That was a good line for me. So, also I'd like to recommend taking personality tests. There's career tests that they can have, personality tests that help you understand who you are. And people have thought a lot more about it than you or I have. Find those tests. My son, when he was in high school at Cathedral, he took a test and there were like 6 parameters. And You got to choose, your answers put you in like 3 of those parameters. So when he took it home, I wiped out his answers and put in mine. And my answer was that I was going to be a priest. Okay, that's a pretty good test, because it kind of got me where I needed to be. But then you can also do that in a career choices too. So if you're creating a career, if you don't have a career, if you're wondering where you're supposed to be, there's online tests for career choices. I looked it up today in Bureau of Labor Statistics. The government says there's 151,853,870 occupations. So, which one do you want to be? But it's not important. It's important to think about that and find what slot you've got, so that your time and value and your efforts are within your own personality type. And that's what God created you to be. And so, use that, use those skills, use those, that wisdom that comes with those kind of tests. So your image of God has a lot to do with where you're going to go in your life. If your God is, and a lot of times we talk about this as men. If you talk about God as a vengeful God, Richard Rohr says, a lot of times we look at God as kind of like the Santa Claus thing, taking notes and checking off a list, Don't get stuck on that image of God. Take that to him, share it with him. If he's a forgiving God, if he's a challenge, does he challenge you in a good way? What are the consequences of your image of God? You know what I'm saying? And then take it to your prayer time, dig into that, talk it out with others. Some people are so cautious, they don't step into the unknown. Allow your relationship with God to be fluid. Allow your relationship with yourself to be fluid. So, one other thing I'd like to challenge the men in a Christian environment is to be creative. There are things in this world that weren't here 20 years ago. Christian men can build something into our life and our culture that has value. And when I was thinking about this, I was saying, how many of you have a Keurig coffee maker? Anybody? I know we do. Several, okay? How old is that whole concept? 20 years at most? Somebody created a Keurig, and I think we're all using it. And so what I'm saying is, if you've got an idea and you're asking God to bless you, he could give you an idea that could make you wealthy, that could bless the whole church, could bless the whole country. Don't discount that, because if you look at the whole history of Western civilization, a lot of the major advances came through Christian livelihood, Christian culture, Christian astronomy, and Christian men who were doing physics, who were doing, geometry, who were doing science. And those things can become that container that we talked about in the first part of your life is something special. And don't block yourself from that creativity that God's put in. So, my other story is Isaiah 58. When I was praying about who I was to be in my 20s, I finished 3 years of youth ministry here on the east side, and I said, now what? And I prayed for about 6 months. And at one point I opened up Isaiah 58:12. It said, we will be called preach, render, and restore ruined houses. And for some reason, that scripture came alive to me, and I said, that's what he was telling me to do. So I started fixing up older houses, and that became my lifeline. economically as a job, but it's also a way to build community, a way to allow people to rent places. And over the years, I say I've met people that just want to take away from being homeless. A lot of times that doesn't work, but a lot of times I feel like that's what he needed me to do. And I got to listen to those people, and I learned how to take applications, and I learned how to understand what God is saying when He says, "The poor will be with you always." Can't we fix that? Why would we want to fix poverty? Well, I think the answer to that question is because He wants us to serve those poor people. That's one answer. And if the poor weren't with you, you wouldn't have them to serve. The other answer to that question is He knows human foibles and our weaknesses. We're all going to kind of mess up. And a lot of times that becomes the precursor of poverty. But that's because we're free. That's one of the answers I had, is learning how to restore ruined houses. So, years ago when I was buying property in the 80s in this neighborhood, I could get a house for $15,000 to $20,000. And now they're selling $450,000. I'll tell you, here's the story. The best story. Okay, you don't always have home runs, but this is the home run. This family wanted to move to Florida, and they said, "Here's our house, $5,500. You send us $125 a month, no interest." Okay, I can do that. And so I started fixing up this 5-bedroom house on Arsenal. It's $318,000, and I brought people in that didn't have any money. They just needed a place to stay, so I started working with them. And I sold it for $31,000, which was $2,000 above the appraisal, because the people wanted to live in this neighborhood. And so how many houses do we want? Nowadays they might, but it's been rehabbed over and over. It's like $400,000. Amazing. But who was I doing what God wanted me to do? Yeah, fixing up houses, because that's what He called me to do. Did it work out? Yeah, it took a lot of work, but it worked out because I was following God's call. So find God's call, do it. Don't be afraid to do something new or do something creative. So here's what I'm doing right now in my mind, is I'm trying to find a way that we can incorporate immigrants into American culture. So I want to find a way to create a not-for-profit that will allow me to hire undocumented immigrants and give them a job, and then help train them in English, help train them in American life and culture, and somehow let the politics work themselves out, so that they can become American citizens. Because my family moved in, came here in the 1880s. As German immigrants. The Italians came in the 1920s. All the other cultures that came into America weren't accepted in the first line of thing, but 2 generations later they became. They're all mainstream American. So this week my thought was, when I was thinking about how to do this, there's probably a lot of ways this won't work. But let's say this is why God created something in me this week. He said, well, if you create this not-for-profit, people, and we've got people can stand on the corner and get jobs. I'd like to make it something like an employment agency where these Hispanics would say, okay, I'm here to work, but you have to go through the Phoenix Immigrant Settlement House, or cohort, which is what my farm is called, Phoenix. So you pay Phoenix takes its cut, and then Phoenix will pay that individual. But that payment is like a contribution to a not-for-profit. I don't know how That might work, might not. But anyway, those are the things I'm thinking about, how to find a way to build our life and build our culture. So that's, so I got a song I want to sing. I wrote this, yeah, I wrote this when I was young. And the theme of it, you'll see some of the things that are talking about building a kingdom, following Jesus, being led by the Spirit. Those things are just part of it.
We'll have joy on the mountain, we'll have love in the land. There'll be peace in the valley when we take each other's hand, and we'll all stand together and lift our hands in praise. And the strong one will be mighty, and the weak one shall be raised. Was a time I was alone. I was sad and lost. The Lord had not shown me the full power in Pentecost. I had not known His love for the likes of you and me. Did not know all His plan for all eternity. Where we'll have joy on the mountain, we'll have love in the land. There'll be peace in the valley when we take each other's hand, and we'll all stand together and lift our hands in praise. And the strong ones will be mighty, and the weak ones will be raised. Then there came a day when a man came down the road. He said his name was Jesus, he could lighten up my load. But I have to give up all my cares, travel by his side. He said there are no saints in heaven, puffed up with earthly pride. There'll be joy on the mountain, there'll be love in the land. There'll be peace in the valley when we take each other's hand, and we'll all stand together and lift our hands in praise. And the strong men will be mighty, and the weak ones shall be raised. Alone again I stood there, his name pounding in my head. With tearful eyes and trembling hands I repeated what he said. He's alone, he's my King, the Spirit fills me with his love. Now this weak must become mighty, by strong one he can save. We'll have joy on the mountain, we'll have love in the land. There'll be peace